Story 1. Do not read aloud. It started raining the second I opened the email. I remember watching the droplets slide down the cabin window, blurring the outline of the pines like they were trying to vanish into the fog. The lake below was a dull slate, barely visible through the glass. I'd just set up my laptop on the old kitchen table, the one with grooves worn deep from years of cutting vegetables directly on the wood, and made my first cup of coffee in a chipped ceramic mug. The cabin belonged to my father's side of the family. No one else used it anymore. I hadn't been up here in 10 years, but everything was just as I'd left it. Same wallpaper curling at the seams. Same creaky floorboard 2 steps before the hallway. Same faint smell of wet ash, even though the fireplace hadn't been used in months. I came here to write, not reminisce. One long weekend, 5 new stories, that was the goal. Something quiet and remote, with no distractions. I had files of half-finished pieces, outlines, and odd notes saved in a folder called Fragments. But none of it felt real anymore. It was just words pretending to be horror. I needed something that actually got under the skin. The inbox was almost empty, except for the usual newsletters and one unread message. No subject line. Just a blank field. The sender's address looked like a fake, a string of numbers and letters, no name, no domain I recognized. I clicked it out of habit. Inside was a plain text story. No greeting, no signature. The formatting was crude, like someone typed it in Notepad and hit send without a second thought. Just a title at the top, Do Not Read Aloud. I thought it was a joke. The kind of internet chain nonsense people used to pass around in early forums. Still, something about the timing, the moment the rain started, the smell of damp wood, the way the wind pushed against the pane, made me read the first few lines aloud without thinking. There's a cabin. The cabin has 3 windows and 1 door. Every night, the door creaks, once, at exactly 1:13 a.m. The man inside never checks. It didn't feel particularly original. But it had a rhythm, a voice that lingered. I read a little more. The man, alone in the woods, starts hearing a noise every night, a soft knock, not forceful. Just one. Always the same time. He doesn't open the door. He doesn't speak about it. He just records the time and tries to ignore it. I stopped halfway through the paragraph, realizing I'd been reading it like I was reciting something. Like I had to. I laughed, quietly. Okay. The heater kicked on, sending a groan through the pipes. The sound made me glance toward the hallway, then back to the screen. I scrolled down. The rest of the story was longer than I'd expected. It didn't really go anywhere. Just detailed what the man heard, the creaks, the distant humming, a soft, rhythmic thump beneath the floorboards. Always at 1:13. Never earlier. Never later. I didn't read the rest. I had better things to do. I flagged the email, thinking I'd mine it later for inspiration. The cabin was quiet again, except for the rain, tapping steady on the roof. I spent the rest of the afternoon outlining a different piece. Something psychological, maybe something based on my old apartment back in Hartford. When the power flickered around 7, I stood and stretched. The rain hadn't let up once. That's when I noticed the metronome. It was sitting on the mantel. A wooden Whitner model, old but still functional. I hadn't seen it earlier. I don't remember putting it there. But it ticked now, slow and soft, even though I hadn't wound it. I turned it over. No spring tension. No key. Still ticking. The sensible part of me assumed it was already running when I arrived. Maybe I bumped it earlier. The sound had just blended into the background, like the rain. Still, I stopped it. No reason for it to be running. The cabin was supposed to be quiet. Later that evening, I FaceTimed my ex-wife. I think I just needed to hear a normal voice. She was surprised to hear from me. "How's the retreat?" she asked. "Wet. But peaceful." "Still writing the weird stuff?" "Trying to." She paused, then looked past the screen. Is someone else there? I shook my head. No. Just me. Huh, she said, a little frown creeping onto her face. Never mind. Must be the lighting. We didn't talk long. I think she could sense I wasn't fully present. By 10, I shut everything down. Laptop closed. Phone on airplane mode. The fireplace crackled to life with a few logs I found in the shed out back. I settled into the old recliner and opened a paperback. It was hard to focus. The wind was picking up. Something about the pressure made the whole house feel tight, like it was holding its breath. I kept glancing at the door. No reason. Just a habit. 3 windows. 1 door. Just like the story said. At 1:12 a.m., I was still awake. Still staring at the fire, the last embers glowing soft red. Then I heard it. One soft, deliberate creak from the front step. Nothing else. No knock. No voice. Just the sound of wood under weight. And then silence. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. A full minute. Nothing. I told myself it was the wind. Or a squirrel. Or the deck shifting from moisture. But the boards hadn't creaked all night. Not once. I stayed in the chair until sunrise. The fire died. The house went cold. And still, I didn't move. I didn't want to find out what was on the other side of the door. Because I wasn't sure I'd heard it outside. The morning was pale and cold. The kind of light that feels like it's coming through frosted glass. I hadn't slept. Just sat there, half wrapped in a wool blanket, trying not to look at the door. I didn't check the porch. There's a line between curiosity and self-preservation. I wasn't interested in proving anything. Maybe if I'd opened it and found nothing, I could have laughed it off. But some part of me knew the absence would be worse. That I'd stand there, looking at an undisturbed deck, and feel like something had already stepped past it. Instead, I made coffee. Poured it slowly. The cabin was quiet, but too quiet. It had that kind of hush where you start noticing sounds that shouldn't be there, like the faint buzzing of silence itself. I walked into the small study room I'd set up in the back, just off the kitchen. There was a single window facing the lake and a wooden desk older than I was. I opened my laptop, but it didn't wake right away. The screen flickered once. Then again. Then went black. It finally booted on the 3rd try, slower than usual. I waited, sipping coffee that was already going lukewarm. When the desktop appeared, I noticed something strange. My writing software was already open. One untitled document sat there, blinking. I don't leave drafts open when I shut down, especially not unnamed ones. I clicked into it, expecting maybe an autosave glitch. There was a single sentence typed out. Keep reading. Nothing else. I closed it. Deleted the file. Emptied the recycle bin without thinking. Probably a mistake I'd made. Maybe I had typed something and forgotten. I'd been tired, unsettled. Easy to explain. But when I opened my email again, I noticed the original message, the one with the story, was gone. Not archived. Not in spam. Just gone. Like it had never been there. I searched for the address, the subject line, keywords. Nothing. I still had the window open in a browser tab. The story was still there. Plain text, unstyled, same as before. I scrolled to where I had stopped. The last line I'd read. The man hears breathing through the keyhole. Below that, the story continued without much change in tone. The man begins covering the keyhole at night. Starts stacking furniture in front of the door. But the knock still comes. Every night. Same time. One creak on the porch. Then silence. That's all it was. No gore. No murder. Just the dread of repetition. The suggestion that something would never stop. Not until he opened the door. Or it opened itself. I didn't read it out loud this time. The rest of the day passed in slow movements. Rain again. Thin at first, then heavy. The kind that seems to fall straight down with no wind, like it's deliberately trying to fill the space around you. I didn't write much. Couldn't focus. I paced the length of the living room, tracing a route between the fireplace and the window. Around 5, I opened the fridge and saw the thermos I'd used the night before. It was open. Not just uncapped, emptied. A puddle had formed at the bottom shelf, spreading slowly under a carton of eggs. I hadn't touched it since yesterday. I was sure I'd closed it, screwed the lid on tight like I always do. The seal was secure. The lid sat on the counter, not near the fridge. I wiped the mess with a dish towel and left the thermos in the sink. The metronome had returned to the mantel. I hadn't moved it there. Last night I had taken it off the shelf, wound it down, and placed it in the drawer next to the firewood basket. I checked. The drawer was empty now. And the metronome was ticking again. Same slow rhythm. Same wooden click. I stared at it for a long time, then finally walked over and stopped it with 2 fingers. That night, I tried to distract myself with a podcast. Downloaded 1 episode while the signal barely held. I curled up in the chair, phone on low volume. A woman's voice discussing ancient funeral practices. Every few minutes, I'd glance toward the front door. By midnight, I had turned the podcast off. I was alone with the rain. I don't remember falling asleep. But at some point, I opened my eyes, and the room was dark. The fire had gone out. I didn't have my phone in hand anymore. The power was still on. The metronome, I noticed, was ticking again. Faster this time. I checked the clock on the wall. 1:07 a.m. And then something changed. Not a sound. Not movement. But pressure. It felt like the air had thickened. Like the house had been sealed from the outside. My ears popped. My skin felt tight, the way it does before a storm breaks. I stood, walked quietly to the study, and sat at the desk. The laptop was open. The draft had returned. No title. Just blinking text. And a new sentence added. It always starts with footsteps. I didn't type it. My hands were cold. Still. A minute passed. Then another. Then I heard it, barely audible over the rain. A single, soft step. Not on the porch this time. Closer. Somewhere inside. I held my breath. Waited. No other sounds followed. I looked at the screen again. The sentence had changed. 1 more line. Then we'll stop. I shut the lid. The ticking stopped. But the house didn't feel any quieter. I didn't sleep. I didn't speak. I sat there, watching the wall until the rain finally slowed. Morning came again. But it didn't feel like something had ended. It felt like something was still waiting. It was still raining when I woke up, though I don't remember falling asleep. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache from a recliner. The fireplace was cold again, but I hadn't moved all night. The blanket I'd draped over myself was on the floor, crumpled in a way that suggested it hadn't just slipped off. It looked, dropped. Or pulled. I stood slowly, joints stiff, and moved toward the kitchenette. The clock on the wall blinked 12 o'clock, which usually meant the power had gone out. I hadn't noticed. The coffee maker blinked too, waiting for me to reset it. Something about the blinking, those quiet, mindless flashes, felt like a countdown, even though nothing was happening. I made coffee. That small act, oddly, helped. The grind of the machine. The steam. The familiarity of pouring something hot into a mug I hadn't washed in 3 days. I didn't look at the metronome. I already knew it was ticking. It hadn't ticked all morning. But now that I was sitting again, laptop open, mug in hand, it started. Slowly. Methodically. No wind-up. No explanation. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. When I opened the laptop, the draft was there again. Same file. Same blinking cursor. A new line had appeared overnight. The story ends when you do. I closed the file. Then the browser. I didn't want to look at it anymore. But when I minimized the window, the desktop had changed. My background was no longer the lake photo I'd used for years. It was a still frame of the cabin, my cabin, from the outside. Rain on the window. A faint reflection in the glass. I stared at the photo. There was someone behind the reflection. Not visible. Suggested. A blur of something that shouldn't have been there. I clicked away. Changed the background manually. It worked. But I couldn't stop thinking about that blur. It wasn't shaped like anything I could name. But it wasn't part of the trees. It wasn't a trick of light. It was watching. I stepped outside for the first time since arriving. I thought fresh air might help. The rain had eased to a mist. The ground was muddy, but solid. I walked around the porch slowly, scanning the boards. The wood was darker in one spot, right where I'd heard the creak. Nothing unusual. Just damp. But I crouched down anyway. Ran my fingers across the surface. A faint indentation. Like pressure. Not a footprint. Not quite. It felt like memory pressed into wood. I went back inside. Locked the door. Sat down. And opened the story again. I didn't want to. But something about it, it wasn't curiosity anymore. It was obligation. I began reading silently, tracing the words with my eyes. The man begins hearing whispers. They say his name. Not loudly. Just once. Each night. I stopped. The cursor blinked at the end of the paragraph. The document wasn't scrolling anymore. I moved the mouse. Tried to highlight. Nothing happened. The screen was frozen. And then, one more line appeared. Out loud. That's when the lights flickered. First the overhead. Then the lamp. The heater. The metronome clicked louder. Sharper. Almost aggressive. I sat still. Staring. Then I began reading again. Not because I wanted to, but because it felt like I'd started something I didn't understand, and maybe couldn't stop. The man hears his name again. This time, it isn't whispered. It's spoken clearly. Firmly. But never twice. He doesn't respond. Another line formed. It wasn't part of the story. You already did. I stopped. My throat felt tight. The room had dimmed somehow, though the lamps were still on. The walls felt heavier. Closer. I saved the file. Renamed it. Closed everything. I told myself I'd leave the next morning. That I'd drive out before sunrise. No good reason to stay. I'd written nothing worthwhile. Just paranoia in fragments. I turned off the laptop. Sat back. And heard it again. A step. Not outside. Not even near the front door this time. It came from the hallway. Just one. As if to remind me that it knew the house too. That it had read the floor plan. Memorized the sounds. I didn't move. The heater shut off. The ticking continued. I waited. Nothing followed. No voices. No knocks. But I didn't sleep. When the sky lightened just barely, I packed. Slowly. Without thinking too much. I zipped up the bag. Closed the laptop. Tied my boots. Then I stopped. The door. It was open. Not wide, just a sliver. Enough for wind. Enough for something to step in without notice. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't forgotten to lock it. And still, it was open. I didn't approach it. I didn't close it. Instead, I walked back to the table, opened the laptop, and began typing. Not the story. Just this. Everything you've read. Every line. Because the email said not to read it out loud. But it also said something else. A line I didn't remember until now. If you start it and don't finish, it'll finish something else. I think I stopped too soon. I think it started writing without me. And I think it's still writing. Somewhere behind me. Tick. 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 I don't want to turn around. Not because I'm afraid of what I'll see. Because I'm afraid I won't see anything at all. Just the absence of something that's already been here. And maybe still is. And maybe it's reading over my shoulder. Right now. Story 2. The man in the hallway isn't my father anymore. My dad hasn't blinked in 3 days. I know that sounds made up. I know because when I try to tell myself it's not true, it sounds made up to me too. But I've been watching. Every night, from my room, through the crack in the door. And I'm sure of it. It started on a Thursday. Just a regular one, homework, leftover spaghetti, the usual arguments about brushing my teeth the right way, which in Dad's mind meant longer than necessary. He was tired. Work had been long. He was quieter than usual, but that wasn't new. Sometimes he goes days without saying much when he's thinking through something. That night, though, there was something else. Something I couldn't place until later. He made my sandwich wrong. It was supposed to be peanut butter and grape jelly, cut diagonally, no crust. He'd been making it the same way since I was 6. But that night, he used strawberry, didn't toast the bread, and cut it straight down the middle like a cafeteria lunch lady. I remember staring at it for a long time. Not because I was mad, I wasn't, but because it didn't look like it came from my dad's hands. I didn't say anything. He'd been in one of his distant moods. Just nodded toward the living room and turned on the TV. That night, I went to bed a little earlier than usual. Not tired, really, just full of a feeling I didn't have a name for. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of the radiator clinking now and then, and the wind tapping the living room window like a branch trying to get in. I fell asleep for a while. Not deep sleep. I woke up to the sound of the hallway light buzzing. It's a motion sensor light. Cheap, orange, plugged into the outlet near the bathroom. It only comes on when someone walks past, or if the heater kicks just right and shifts the air. But this time it stayed on longer than usual. Way longer. I rolled over in bed and stared at the gap where the door didn't quite shut. I never closed it all the way, not since I was small. The crack was thin, but it was enough to see the hallway glow faint and orange, like the sun was stuck just under the floor. There was movement. A slow shadow across the light. Someone standing just outside the bathroom. Still. Waiting. Or maybe just standing for no reason. Dad? I whispered. Nothing. The figure moved again. Barely. Just the slow shuffle of someone thinking they're alone. Then it turned, and the light clicked off. I listened. No footsteps. No door opening or closing. Just quiet. The deep kind, like the apartment was holding its breath. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, Dad was at the stove making eggs. He smiled when I walked in. Not a real one, though. It didn't go to his eyes. "Sleep okay?" he asked. I nodded. "You?" He blinked once. Just once. Out like a rock. He set the plate in front of me. The eggs looked fine. The toast was burned on one side. He sat down across from me, staring just a little too long. Not blinking. That's when I started watching. Over the next 2 days, little things changed. He didn't hum in the kitchen like he usually did. He forgot the names of my teachers. He poured orange juice into his cereal like it was nothing. He wore his watch on the wrong wrist and didn't notice when I pointed it out. At night, he walked the hallway. I never heard his bedroom door open. I never saw him step into the light. But every night around 2, the motion sensor flicked on. And every night, he stood there. Just out of reach. Just beyond the frame of the door. Motionless. Sometimes I whispered his name. Sometimes I just held my breath and waited for the light to go out. It always did. On Saturday, I tested something. I waited until he went to bed, then took his shoes, the ones he left neatly beside the door every night, and turned them around. Toes facing the wall. Something he would never do. He was neat about things like that. In the morning, they were still turned. He saw them. Looked at them for a long time. Then looked at me. Not angry. Not surprised. Just still. "You turn these?" he asked. I nodded. "Why?" I shrugged. "I don't know." He didn't respond. Just picked them up and placed them back, perfect, aligned, facing out. I watched his fingers. They moved fine. Steady. Not robotic. But they didn't look like his hands. They looked like someone pretending to have hands. That night, the hallway light came on again. I sat up. Quiet. Waiting. The mirror hangs directly across from my bedroom. Long, thin, in a brass frame. You can't help but see it every time the light turns on. That night, I watched the reflection instead of the hallway. I saw him. Standing there. But he wasn't facing the bathroom. He was facing me. Through the mirror. And he was smiling. His real body wasn't moving. Just the image in the glass. Just enough to know it saw me watching. Then the light went out. And the smile stayed with me. Long after the dark returned. Sunday felt like a snow globe turned upside down. The world outside had gone still, no cars on the street, no footsteps in the hallway above. The snow piled higher on the window ledge, soft and slow, as if it were trying to cover up the apartment entirely. I watched it for a while from the living room. The silence pressed in, the kind that makes your ears search for something, anything, just to be sure you're not imagining it. Dad was in the kitchen, staring into the fridge. Not looking for anything. Just standing there, door open, the light spilling out onto his hands. He wasn't moving, not really. Just holding the edge of the door like he'd forgotten what food was for. After maybe a full minute, he reached in and pulled out a slice of bread. Plain. No butter, no toasting. He folded it in half and chewed with his mouth closed, no expression. I watched from the hallway, just past the edge of the wall. "Can we go to the store later?" I asked, keeping my voice light. His head tilted slowly in my direction, like it took a second too long to process the sound. "Store," he repeated. "Yeah. We're out of jelly. And milk. You always say breakfast needs milk." He blinked. "Just once." "Right. Milk." I went back to my room. I couldn't explain it, but something about the way he said milk was wrong. Like it didn't belong to him. The word had shape, but not weight. Like it had been borrowed. Later that afternoon, he didn't go to the store. He just sat in his chair and stared at the TV, though it wasn't on. The screen stayed black. I checked the remote, the batteries were in. I even pressed the power button myself. Nothing. He didn't respond. Not to the button. Not to me. Just sat there, the slice of bread untouched on the plate beside him. That night, I stayed up on purpose. Not in bed. Not waiting behind the door. I sat cross-legged in the hallway, right against the wall, just out of reach of the motion light. I held my breath every time the heater rattled. It turned on at 2:09 a.m. The light flickered, brighter than usual, like it had been holding something in. Then footsteps. Bare feet. Light. Careful. I pressed my back against the wall and kept still. He passed me. Not quickly. Not stealthy either. Just calm. Like someone going to the kitchen for water. But his feet didn't make a normal sound. Not quite. They didn't scuff or creak the floor. It was more like a shuffle, but cleaner, deliberate. Too quiet for the size of his body. Like his weight was missing. He stopped in front of the mirror. Didn't move. Didn't adjust his robe. Didn't scratch his neck like he always did when cold. Just stood there, breathing slow. The mirror caught everything. Even the wrong things. His reflection smiled again. But this time, so did he. Both faces, in sync. Same lift of the cheek. Same slow curl of the lip. But the one in the mirror blinked, and the man in the hallway didn't. I stayed frozen. He turned toward my room. Not toward me. Toward the door. He walked forward, steady. I crawled back, slow as I could, pushing the door open an inch more to slide in without making noise. Closed it gently behind me. Didn't latch it. Just held it. He stopped just outside. I could see the shadow. It waited there for minutes. 5, maybe 10. I counted by breathing. Then it moved away. Light off. Silence again. The next morning, I told myself it had been a dream. That I'd fallen asleep against the wall. That my mind had filled in the rest. I even tried to make breakfast to feel normal, poured the cereal, opened the fridge. The milk was back. Full. Unopened. But I hadn't heard him leave. And the snow on the porch was undisturbed. I asked him about it. Did you go out early? He looked up from the table. Toast again. Plain. No plate. Out? For milk. His head tilted again. Same slow lean, like a mechanical doll pivoting on a rusted joint. You said we were out, I added. Yesterday. He looked at the fridge. Then back at me. We're not. I know. But we were. No reply. That afternoon, I stayed near the mirror. I ran tests. Moved back and forth. Tilted my head. Tried making weird faces. It reflected normally. Everything matched. Until he walked behind me. He didn't stop. Didn't speak. Just passed through the hallway, coat in hand, even though the front door never opened. But in the mirror, he wasn't carrying the coat. His reflection just had his hands at his sides. I looked back at him directly. Coat still there. Fingers curled around the sleeve. I looked again at the mirror. No coat. Still walking. But the reflection turned its head, just slightly, toward me. Only the reflection. That night, I tried locking the door. First time in months. Didn't help. The light still turned on. Footsteps. Pause. The creak of floorboards right outside. Then breathing. Not loud. Not heavy. Just too close. Like someone pressing their mouth against the crack of the door. Testing how little space they need. I didn't sleep. I kept the covers up to my nose. Eyes open. Every now and then, I glanced toward the doorknob. It never turned. But it didn't need to. Because I think it was already in the room. And just pretending not to move. Monday came without sunlight. The snow had stopped sometime during the night, but the sky stayed colorless. Everything outside the window looked frozen in place, parked cars, slumped trees, even the thin cloud of breath from the neighbor's dog. No wind. No movement. Just the kind of stillness that makes you whisper without meaning to. Dad was already in the kitchen. I could hear the fridge door creak open and stay that way longer than it should have. I waited before going in. Took my time brushing my teeth, pulling my sweatshirt over my head, pretending the delay mattered. He didn't speak when I walked past the hallway. Just stood by the window, back turned, holding a piece of toast without eating it. No radio playing, no news on. His coat was on, fully zipped, even though the apartment was warm. I sat at the table slowly, watching him. He didn't look out the window like people normally do. His head didn't move. His shoulders didn't rise when he breathed. I wasn't sure he was breathing at all. The toast in his hand had no bite in it. "Are you okay?" I asked. His hand twitched once. Just a flicker in the fingers, like a flinch. He turned around slowly, lips parted like he might answer, but nothing came. Then he walked past me. Not hurried. Not sluggish. Just even. Too even. The motion light flicked on behind him. Bright orange, like a warning. I waited until he disappeared into the bathroom. Then I checked the plate he left behind. 3 crumbs. No bite marks. The bathroom door never closed. No sound of running water. Just the soft creak of floorboards shifting, then nothing. He didn't come out for 10 minutes. That night, I called Grandma. I didn't want to say anything that sounded crazy, so I told her I missed her. Said maybe I could visit this weekend. She sounded surprised. "I thought your dad said you two were going on a trip," she said. I swallowed hard. "What trip?" She paused. "He told me you were heading up north. Somewhere with trees." I looked at the hallway. "He didn't tell me." "That's strange," she said. "He even asked me to mail your old snow boots." I didn't remember any boots. I didn't remember a trip. We hung up a little while after. I didn't say anything more. I didn't ask questions. I already knew I wouldn't like the answers. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept the lamp on. Stayed in bed with the covers pulled high, my eyes fixed on the door. At 2:12 a.m., the light clicked on again. Not the lamp. The hallway one. The glow spilled across the floor. I held my breath. There was a shadow standing in the middle of it. Still. Like before. But this time, it moved into my doorway. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just stood there, half-lit, 1 foot in shadow, one hand resting on the doorknob without turning it. His mouth was open slightly. Not breathing. Not smiling. Just open. I didn't move. Didn't blink. I knew it wasn't sleep paralysis. I could feel my toes press against the mattress. I could feel my fingernails digging into my palm. But I couldn't make myself speak. Then he blinked. Slow. Deliberate. As if learning how for the first time. And the hallway light went out. The silence was worse than the shadow. I waited. 20 minutes passed. Maybe more. No sound. When I finally got up and looked into the hallway, it was empty. His bedroom door was open. No one inside. The bed hadn't been slept in. That morning, I asked him where he'd gone. He was already dressed, sitting at the table. The toast was there again. Untouched. "Last night," I said. "You were up." He looked at me, head slightly tilted. "Was I?" "You came to my room." He blinked slowly, one eye at a time. "No," he said. "I didn't. I didn't argue. I just watched as he raised the toast to his mouth, opened it slightly. And then set the toast back down. Still no bite. I started packing that afternoon. Quietly. In my room. I didn't know where I'd go yet. Maybe Grandma's. Maybe nowhere. But I knew I wouldn't be staying another night. I zipped up my backpack, tucked my sketch pad between some shirts, and went out to the living room. He wasn't there. Neither was his coat. I opened the front door to check the snow. No footprints. Just a smooth layer, untouched since it fell. I closed the door again and turned toward the hallway. The mirror. It had changed. It didn't show the reflection of the room anymore. It showed me. And behind me, him. But not him. He was smiling in the reflection. But the room was empty. No one stood behind me when I turned. Only the mirror. And that smile. Frozen. I threw a blanket over it. Didn't touch it again. That night, I waited in bed with the light on. Fully dressed. Bag zipped. Ready to run. But nothing happened. No footsteps. No breathing. No light. Only silence. And in the silence, I heard something I still can't explain. My voice. From the hallway. Whispering. Asking if I was awake. Over and over. I never answered. I just waited for morning. And when it came, he was gone. No note. No dishes in the sink. Just one thing. The mirror. Uncovered. And in it. Only my room. No reflection. Just emptiness. And a faint outline of someone sitting where I should have been.